Welcome to Herbie's Reef. We thought we'd do a quick tank update and then a equipment overview, because we've never gone over all the equipment in our tank, and so we thought we would do a quick video to show y'all what kind of equipment we run. For a quick update on our tank though, I think on our last video we had just put our McCosker's flasher wrasse in, and as you can see he's doing quite well. Let me try to zoom in on him. Well, that did not work. Anyway, let's see. And he's still got his juvenile color, so hopefully he will brighten up as time goes by. But he's been very healthy for us. I've read these can be a little hard to keep for some people, but he eats and he so far has been doing quite well. And I think we have added a few corals. We added a green slimer acro, and it's been doing really well. We put it over here, and then we moved some of our other corals. We had this bird of paradise bird's nest. We had that on top of the cave before, and we moved it over here because we're trying to make room. We want to eventually put a pink lemonade acropora up here, and we want to put a bug out stylo from Jason Fox, and we want to put that here up on the right side of this torch. And so we were just making some room and kind of moving some things around. And then we also added this forest fire Monopora digitalis, and we got it cheap because it is bleached. So it should turn a bright orange eventually. It's got good polyp extension, so I have hopes that it will open up and live and grow. But we only paid $15 for it, so if it dies, then we're not out too much. But I hope it lives. It's one of my favorite corals, and we've been looking for one for a while. There's our Squamosa clan. He's doing quite well. And we added this jack-o'-lantern from Jason Fox, and we read that they like low light, so I don't know if being under this overhang will be a little too low of light, but it seems like it's already growing a little bit. We've probably had it in here 2 weeks, so our hope is that it could cover this pedestal and just add some interest there. And then we added this on the back wall. If you look real carefully, we added these blue zoas. I think they're called blueberry field zoas. So hopefully they'll do as well as the other zoas, and we can just get this whole backside covered up with zoas eventually. So I think that's about it for the tank update. And then as far as the equipment goes, just bear in mind that we just moved to this house and we're remodeling. So on the other side of this wall, we're going to create kind of a fish room in a closet that we have. So a lot of this equipment will be moving there, and it'll look neater after all of that. But for the first piece of equipment, I have 2 Gen 3 Radions, and then I have the Aquatic Life Hybrid T5s. And since we've started running these T5s in addition to the Radions, it seems to have really helped the coloration of our tank. We really like the colors it produces, and it's taken away most of the disco effect that we had from the Radions before, so we really like that light. And then I've got these gyres. I have 2 gyres, and really probably for this tank, it's a 130 gallon. We really only needed 1 gyre because it's mainly LPS. And as you can see, this one goes across the top, and it really creates a good circulation. Like it hits the wall and then comes back around, and makes quite a bit on its own. So I have this one on reverse flow, and it adds a little bit, but it doesn't, yeah, I don't have it on near full power. It was probably not even worth getting. And then also here's our top that we got from Octo Aquatics. This is a custom top that they make, and we'll do a video on that on its own. We did an unboxing of it, and we'll post that soon. But that's an Octo Aquatics top. Took him about 4 weeks to make it, and we're really pleased with it. It's got this little food door. So, all right, and going down to the sump, we have the Emerald sump by Trigger Systems, and it's got 3 filter socks, and we're running a Herbie style overflow. And then I've got my Apex set up over here, and it's the older style Apex. I'm going to take this gel filter off now that we don't have the blues in the way. And then I've just got this full of live rock and media for growing the bacteria. And then the middle section's the refugium, and I run the Kessel Halo for the refugium light, and I run that at nighttime. And I cannot recommend this light highly enough. I mean, this thing has changed our tank around to where I never have measurable nitrates or phosphates with this, and I grow so much Chaeto. I take out a basketball size almost every week, and to throw out. And then you can see it's got some red algae and other nastiness in there, but we take all of that out, and it all absorbs nitrates and phosphates, so that's no problem. And then I have my calcium reactor. It runs by a peristaltic pump, and I have it on the outflow line, so you can see that it just kind of it's an intermittent drip, but it's a constant rate, and I'm running it right around 30 mils an hour. I mean a minute, 30 mils a minute. And then I have the BRS dual reactors. I have one with GFO and one with carbon right now. I don't always run GFO. I usually run carbon, but I don't always run GFO. But with the new tank, and we've been feeding the corals a lot, it seems to just kind of keep the algae off the glass a little bit. And I do, even with this refugium, lately I've been dosing vinegar just a little. I dose about 15 mils a day, just to keep the bacteria happy and the nitrates and phosphates down. I've never had measurable nitrates, but there was about a week where I had just a slight measurement by Hannah tester on the phosphates, so I've just been running the GFO and the vinegar since then. And then this is my return chamber, and I have a pump in there that I used to run my calcium reactor off of, that I just need to take out of there, so that you see that. And then I also am running the Jabo as their return pump, and I think it's the 12,000 something. I forget the letters they put in front of it, but the 12,000 version. And I run that up through a manifold, so that valve goes to the tank, and then I've got the 4 different valves here, and I ended up taking the UV sterilizer off of that valve. I don't know if there's something wrong with that valve or what, but I just didn't seem to produce much flow, so I put another pump in for the UV sterilizer. And then I've got my chiller, my media reactor, and the skimmer going from there. Okay, and then going to the next section, I have it divided with a black plastic bag, just so that not so much light gets into my skimmer and won't grow as much algae. Oh, and forgive all the tape that's on a lot of the tubing, but I was starting to grow algae in my tubing, so I put tape over a lot of it, and I need to do a better job and make it a little neater. But this is a skimmer, and it's an external recirculating style, and this thing's a monster. It's really made for a much bigger tank than this, but it just really, I've been very happy with this unit. So as you can see, it's producing lots of skimmate, and I have the Avast Marine skimmate locker, and I mainly have this just so that if the skimmer starts to overflow, they've got a thing on here, this thing right here, it will create a pressure which goes back to the switch and turns the skimmer off. So that way I don't ever have to worry about the skimmer overflowing. And it's not a huge worry with these recirculating skimmers anyways, because this thing, I never have to touch it. It just constantly stays stable. But yeah, it's always better to have a little protection from a flood, especially a flood of something as nasty as the skimmate. And then there's my UV sterilizer. It's a pretty big unit. It's the one from BRS, and it was the one they recommended for this size tank. And I keep that running 24/7. especially right now while the tank, this is we moved recently, and so the kind of a little more stressful period for the fish, so we wanted to keep the UV going. And then I've got my CO2 reactor in this section of the sump, or of the bottom of the tank, but I actually have the calcium reactor outside of the tank on the right side here, and that will eventually go in that fish room I was talking about. But I'm running a carbon doser. In this tank, really, it's probably a little overkill to have a calcium reactor for it, so I'm not having to use just a whole lot of CO2. I'm keeping the pH in the CO2, in the calcium reactor at right around 6.8 to 6.9, and that's holding my alkalinity rock solid at around 9-ish, 9 DKH. But there's the carbon doser, and I love that. It's expensive, but it gives you an exact amount of CO2 to your calcium reactor. And then I bought this Masterflex pump for my calcium reactor that it's hooked to I have it hooked to the effluent line, and it just keeps a constant 10 RPM going. And 10 RPM equates, with this particular tubing I have on it, it equates to right around 30 mils a minute. And I could actually run it slower and run the pH in the calcium reactor a little lower, and that would make a slower drip rate, but this was the tubing I had, and the slowest you can run that with this tubing is 30 mils, so I just raised the pH instead of changing the tubing. And then this is my container for my top off, and then there's my chiller, and then lastly, here's my calcium reactor. And this is a Skim's calcium reactor, and I've had to modify this thing. I have not been happy with this calcium reactor. Without modification, this thing just bubbles, and it produces so much air, because it has a recirculating design for the CO2, and it produces so much air that it constantly sounds like a washing machine in the living room. I mean, it is, to me, it's just unbearably loud. So what I've done is I've clamped off the recirculating line. You can see I've got kind of a rigged, I've got hemostats from work hooked up to this side because I didn't have another three-way valve for it. And then on this side I just have a valve that's shut off. And then I ran the CO2 line directly into the intake here, and I probably waste a little bit of CO2 from doing this, but it's so much better than the noise that for me it's been worth it. And Bulk Reef Supply, they troubleshooted this thing with me for so long, and they eventually gave my money back on it. And I was going to get a Geo, but because I think Geo solves the problem. The Vertex that they sell at Bulk Reef Supply, I just wasn't real happy with the ratings. It seems like everyone has trouble with them leaking, and it's kind of designed the same way as this Skim's reactor, so I'm worried it's going to have the same issue with the loud noise. But since I've cut off the recirculating line, it has been totally quiet, and so we'll see how it goes. I've just had that going for about 3 days like that, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm going to put this gel filter back on and let y'all look at the tank instead of the calcium reactor. I don't know how it's going to end up turning out, but if it works, no reason to replace it. And I just can't say enough good things about Bulk Reef Supply, because they have tried to troubleshoot this thing with me, and they agree that it shouldn't be producing as much air as it had. And they ultimately returned my money and didn't make me return the product. So you just can't beat their customer service. I love BRS. So anyhow, that's an update, and that's our equipment. Let me know if there's anything you want to know more about, and any future videos you'd like us to do. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe.